Celia, and tonight we're talking about multi-hazard early warning systems. And it's a good time to talk about these things as we are in the midst of the Atlantic hurricane season. But warning systems are not only for hurricanes, and you'll find out a lot more about these systems, how they work, and why they're necessary right here on this edition of The People's Business. We have with us tonight to break it all down for us Kerry Hinds, the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. Along with her, we have Dr. Brewster. He's the Director as well, but of the Coastal Zone Management Unit. Semelka Jackman is a senior meteorologist at the Barbados Meteorological Services, and Dr. Nicole Greenidge is with us as well. She's a disaster risk management specialist with CDEMA. So stick around, we got a lot to talk about as we look at multi-hazard early warning systems, why they're important, right here on The People's Business. Back with you on The People's Business to get some more details on this multi-hazard early warning system, what they're working on for us here in Barbados. This has been a work in progress, and there have been a number of workshops as our disaster management officials get up to speed and try to design something that can work for Barbados. With us tonight, Kerry Hinds, the Director of the Department of Emergency Management. Dr. Brewster, the Director of the Coastal Zone Management Unit. We have the Met Office in the house as well with Semelka Jackman. She's a senior meteorologist there. And Dr. Nicole Greenidge is a disaster risk management specialist with CDEMA. So good to have all of you on this edition of The People's Business, because we need to hear about how a warning system would work for Barbados. I remember, Kerry, I had this conversation with you at one of your more recent workshops. Talk to us about what you're working on in terms of these multi-hazard early warning systems.
Good night, everyone. Good night, colleagues, panel, Barbados. I think first we need to define what is an early warning, a multi-hazard early warning system. And it really is an integrated system of hazard monitoring, forecasting and prediction, disaster risk assessment, communication and preparedness mechanism, which affords us to alert the public and for the public really to act accordingly in advance of any hazardous event. Over the past couple of years, we have been looking to enhance the early warning system. We have made a number of strides as it relates to broadening the scope of the multi-hazard early warning system to encompass more than just the hydromet hazard. and I'm sure the representative from the ministry, from the Barbados Met Office, will can give you a little bit more in-depth information into that. But we've also been focusing on uh, the tsunami hazard as well. And quite recently, we sought to pull together most of this in terms of having an overarching national level policy to really guide the program and activities. The, the policy is really that strategic piece of documentation that will guide the program and will offer that process um, kind to anchor the program and identify the way how we will go forward in terms of the implementation, the management, the monitoring and evaluation of the early warning system, and really to identify and really articulate the roles and responsibilities of the various players and various stakeholders in that system.
Yeah, and there are a number of stakeholders as represented here on our program tonight. And as you mentioned, the hazards there are a variety of hazards now as we have been exposed to as a population. Of course, we know what happened with the volcano in St. Vincent when we had the Met Office looking at the direction where the ash from that volcano there would present itself coming across Barbados. The Met Office did a great job in its analysis of that. So it would be good to hear from Semelka about the inner workings of multi-hazard early warning systems and how will the Met Office play its part in all of this.
Hey, good night, listeners. Good night to the panelists. In my office, we deal with the prediction of some hazards that affect the island. So,
Right.
and in my office, we deal with rainfall, deal with wind. Wind would include like tropical storms, but you could also have significant wind. For example, last year with the freak storm, that would have been a wind and a rain event. So we do forecasting for those hazards. We do for marine, which we are also the focal point for tsunami. It isn't necessary. We are the alerting body for tsunamis in Barbados. We also do haze. Yes, that's haze, and the volcanic ash kind of fell into that as it relates to the prediction of the ash coming across the island. That is where my office falls within the early warning system. We do the predictions and then we work with the partners closely with DEM so that then they would be able to share responses to the public where we share the impacts of particular hazards.
And a lot of the hazards affect our coastlines as well. That's why we have Dr. Brewster on to talk about the Coastal Zone Management Unit's role in helping to develop these early warning systems. A lot of the action, Dr. Brewster, happens on our coastlines. Whether it would be a tsunami, they would hit the coastlines first. Of course, a system coming like a hurricane or a tropical storm, a similar situation there. Talk to us about how you are working to help develop the policies and all the inner workings of the early warning system for Barbados.
Thanks a lot, Shane. Good evening, Barbados. As it stands right now, the Coastal Zone Management Unit works very closely with the Department of Emergency Management in trying to help with the best mechanisms for assessing hazards, risks, and vulnerabilities for certain areas of not only the coastline, but the island in general. And as part of the Coastal Risk Assessment and Management Program, we were able to look at several what we will call coastal hazards for the entire island and identify areas of greatest potential vulnerability to those different types of hazards. In addition to that, we also try to assist where practicable as being the co-chair of the Technical Standing Committee on Coastal Hazards and Tsunamis within the DEM for that purpose as well. So we recognize the significance and the importance of having the early warning systems for the island.
And another critical partner is the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, represented tonight by Dr. Nicole Greenidge. These early warning systems you're also developing throughout the region, I would imagine.
Shane, you're right. But I just want to take a quick step back. When we talk about the early warning systems, CDEMA's role, you would often hear of CDEMA's role relating to making immediate and coordinated response to our participating states, of which Barbados is one of those 19 states. But we also have a role in ensuring that we have our states adopting the best practices and policies as it relates to disaster loss reduction. CDEMA's role, therefore, speaks not only to providing the best guidance to our states, whether it's those model policies, whether it's the best research, but also through partnerships with several agencies. So in the same way, we do have a representation here, whereby we have the Department of Emergency Management, but you also have the partners that have a role in generating that information. So you have your Met Services, you have the Coastal Zone Management Unit. Similarly, at the regional level, we'll have the Caribbean Institute for Meteorology and Hydrology that we would work closely with to help us to identify those threats from that regional perspective. And of course, as it relates to seismic risk, we will partner therefore with the University of West Indies Seismic Research Center. So when we speak of the early warning systems, there is that regional level architecture, and there's also the national level architecture. CDEMA's role would be to work very closely with our member state, our participating state, our focal point, the Department of Emergency Management, to ensure that we provide them with the model guidance. So when it came to the development of their policy, CDEMA's role was to ensure that we could guide them in terms of what should go into that policy, what should be the pillars, what is the best information. And we've already been using that term multi-hazard. We're using that word, but really and truly, that's a new concept for us in terms of how we make this practical in Barbados and across our participating states. So I'll just close it there for now, Shane, but I'll look forward to any other questions.
Yes, it's about making it practical for the public as well, who they will have some questions, and we will try to provide some answers for them through you, our partners here right on the People's Business. Those numbers to call for those of you who want to know a bit more about how these early warning systems can work, what you need to know about responding to these early warning systems, because that's a major part of it too. You can call 228-5562 or 228-5563. Those are our phone lines to call. Remember, when you call, listen to the phone and not your television, and we will get those answers for you. We have a number of our partners here to give you those responses on tonight's edition of the People's Business as we focus on the multi-hazard early warning systems for Barbados. We'll take a break and be right back. Zoning in on those multi-hazard early warning systems. There are so many hazards that we now have to be conscious of in the region. There are hurricanes and storms. There's also seismic activity in the form of earthquakes, earth tremors. Then there are volcanoes, active volcanoes in the region, which can generate tsunamis, and simply some freak weather systems that may pass through our neck of the woods from time to time. So all of these things we have to be really paying attention to, getting those alerts. There are applications right now as well that many of us use, and we'll talk about that tonight. The very popular one, cap.cap, where we get those immediate alerts from the Met Office. So you'll get more details on how you can get a better understanding of how you can make that work for you. But as far as the early warning systems go and the risks associated, I want to come back to you, Director Hinds, to talk about what's coming up. International Risk Reduction Day. Tell us a bit about that.
Well, October 13th annually has been designated by the United Nations General Assembly to promote a global culture of reducing risk. And this year, we are acknowledging the fact the focus is on raising awareness about multi-hazard early warning systems and the availability and the access to such systems. So as a globe, we seek to acknowledge the progress that has been made as it relates to these early warning systems, specifically target of the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction, and this is the global framework which guides the work for disaster risk reduction across countries. Target G speaks to substantially increasing the availability of and access to these multi-hazard early warning systems and disaster risk information and assessment to people by 2030. And that is very important. We here in Barbados, we continue to have what I would call a pervasive program, preparedness, public awareness program, where we try to educate persons about our early warning systems, about disaster risk reduction on a whole. And it was really in this vein that we felt it important to have this discussion tonight. And obviously, and also on our various social media channels, and as we progress during the week, we will just place a number of tips, give persons more information about these multi-hazard early warning systems and what we have been doing, not just as CEM, but as a collective in terms of the various stakeholders, what we have been doing really to enhance these multi-hazard early warning systems, make them available to the public, and at the end of the day, the whole goal is to ensure that once we have these early warning systems, persons can act early and accordingly as it relates to whatever impending hazards that may befall us.
Are you doing anything special on October 13th? Any practice drills? I know sometimes you do drills and just get the public aware about how to respond in the event of a hazard. Are you doing anything special on that day?
With respect to, as I said, we are utilizing more of the social media platforms. We do have a number of meetings for that particular day, a number of webinars that we will be participating in and meetings for the stakeholders. That is more surrounded around the policy because we have been working on the draft multi-hazard early warning systems policy for quite some time. And it is within this vein that we are really trying to finalize that documentation so that we will have it ready to go through our governance process, our Emergency Management Advisory Council, and then on to Cabinet at some point in the very near future to have it approved. So we are looking at doing those type of activities. But our activities as it relates to multi-hazard early warning systems will continue, and it will include some public activities as well, but not necessarily on that particular day.
How soon before, probably by the year end, we could have that policy in place? Have you set a target date?
Yes, we are hoping to have it in place by the end of the year. As I said, we're just looking at just finalizing the draft. Hopefully we'll get it to Cabinet as soon as possible. It does not, as I said, it really is the strategic framework. And it's not to say that we're not doing activities as the various stakeholders are not doing activities, we are. But I think it is very important guidance and strategic document to guide the national level program as we go forward.
And I know we're in the hurricane season, but I'm still very glad to have Dr. Brewster on this program to talk a bit more about how this would operate for tsunamis, because the last time you made a presentation to the seminar, that seminar a few months ago, you spoke about presenting an analysis, a simulation for a tsunami possibly coming to Barbados, and just painting that picture for members of the Cabinet of Barbados, and it was quite startling for many. I remember the Minister of Information speaking about it, Wilfred Abrams, and how startled he was about how far inland a tsunami could come. And I'm thinking that these early warning systems would work for tsunamis as well. Actually, that's one of the reasons for them. Talk a bit about that analysis that you've been doing at Coastal Zone Management Unit.
Thanks, Shane. Well, as part of the work that we've been doing with the Department of Emergency Management, for the last 6 months, we've been trying to work on a tsunami-ready project through the Caribbean Tsunami Information Center, which is based in Barbados, that has within the Coastal Zone Management Unit in Barbados, but it has a regional outlook. And the area that we actually identified to look at for that study was the area between Hastings and Rendezvous, right? The intention really was to try and encapsulate what could happen if a significant tsunami was able to come from, in essence, the eastern side of the island, and what sort of impact it would have on the island in general. So we were able to have interaction with the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration, NOAA, from the USA, who were able to actually do some significant tsunami model runs for us. And then they combined them to provide the worst case scenario in terms of what could happen if a tsunami was to impact Barbados. And the most startling things that happened, obviously, was that the tsunami has the potential to wrap around the entire island, obviously, especially if it's coming from the east or the northeast sections of the island. And those low-lying areas, especially along some parts of the south coast, the west coast, and some areas of the east coast are going to be the most heavily impacted. Now, because we as the Coastal Zone Unit have done a lot of work in terms of using light imaging, radar for data collection, what we've been able to do is, using the LiDAR system, we were able to get accurate near-shore bathymetry depths out to about 40 meters contour line. And then we did a similar thing also for the entire island. So we were able to get a really good digital elevation model of the island that could run seamlessly from land to sea. And in doing that, it actually surprised NOAA that we had such a comprehensive data set that was able to allow them to more effectively run their models for the potential wave inundation along the sections of the shoreline. This project is the second project of its nature, because the first one we did with the through CTIC again, and that area was from Mullins all the way up to Sherman's, and that was done with IH Cantabria out of Spain. And in doing that, we were able to also look at inundation impacts along the upper west coast of the island as well. And what surprised people on that first study was people thought that the wave would actually run a lot further inland than it actually did, based on the models. And that's because we had the accurate elevation. So we were not taking the traditional approach whereby we just pick a contour line, like say wherever the 10-meter or 20-meter contour line is, and then say that is the point of inundation. We were actually able to accurately model how far inland some of the waves would go. And generally, what we found was that between the 5 to 7 meter contour line is where the flood line could fall. And some people may say that they don't understand what that means, but technically it means that it hugs very close to the coastal road or slightly inland from the coastal road. And depending upon your elevation or land height behind the coastal road, you may or may not be impacted. In the study area specifically for Hastings to Rendezvous, the general trend that we found was that in much of the area of Hastings, because you have like that low-lying cliff running along the Hastings Ridge by where you have Coconut Fort and not advertising or anything, so but you know what I mean. Just calling in place names. Coconut Court, where the European Commission is running along that elevation along there. There was very little penetration apart from the low-lying area because you're on a cliff height. But when you drop down into Accra, because Accra is so flat and low-lying, you get an extensive area of penetration there. And similarly, in the area of Worthing heading into Rendezvous, there's a similar level of somewhat high-level penetration going in. You also have to remember too that because the area is not totally flat and barren, but you do have structures there, that the waves will impact on buildings along the way. So as part of your whole warning process, which is why we always practice the tsunami drills at least once or twice a year, it isn't only to look to, if you hear the noise, to run, etc. You also have to give consideration to where you are, because depending upon how you have to get to a height or a place of higher elevation, it may be better for you if you're in a multi-story building to look to elevate vertically than to try to get onto the road and then try to run uphill. Okay?
Yeah,
and you must
I'm figuring,
remember too that
I'm figuring because many people will ask the question, to run where? Where will we run?
That's right. So as part of the whole project, we've been able to map the evacuation routes. We've had the meetings with the communities, which was actually covered very well in the media, thanks to them. And then we were also now able to identify, through consultation with the communities, those roads that will take you to higher ground quickly, and some footpaths within the communities as well. And in doing that, those now have to be signposted, and we're in the process of getting those signs prepared. We have to get permission, obviously, from some property owners to mount the evacuation route signs on their walls, whether it be guard walls or buildings, and maybe even on some poles as well, so that people will understand the locations where they have to run to get to that higher ground.
Yeah, and I mean, these things can be scary for some members of the public, but we've seen how disaster can impact communities. We've seen what just happened in Florida with Hurricane Ian. The warning system really helped some people to evacuate from those areas which were completely devastated, and we'll get more details as we take you, our audience, our viewers, through this edition of The People's Business. Of course, Semelka, we have to talk to her about what the Met Office does and how they use CAP to help educate us and help warn us about some of these systems that have been coming across the region. And of course, Dr. Greenidge, we'll hear a bit more from her as well as our regional partner in CDEMA. So we'll take a quick break. Remember those numbers to call: 228-5562, 228-5563. We'll be back in a few moments. Tonight we're giving you details on the multi-hazard early warning systems for Barbados, how they work, and how you should respond on hearing or getting information about a hazard affecting the island. Just a reminder about who's sharing with us tonight: Director Kerry Hinds of the DEM, Dr. Brewster of the Coastal Zone Management Unit. We also have Semelka Jackman, Senior Meteorologist, and Dr. Nicole Greenidge. She is a Disaster Risk Management Specialist with CDEMA. Semelka, talk about the work that you've been doing throughout the last month or so. It has got pretty busy. August was dead, and then, as usual, it's always a September to remember. A number of systems coming across the region, Barbados being spared the worst of it, and then we saw how those systems developed, in the Caribbean Sea, and then getting into the Gulf, where they really generated some energy, doing some serious damage to Florida, Hurricane Ian, and of course Fiona really hitting Puerto Rico hard too. Talk to us about tracking these things and the warnings that your team sends out through cap.cap. By now, cap.cap should be everyone's friend. Please, if you don't have it, download it on your phone so you can get those alerts about flooding and flood warnings, even thunderstorm warnings that the Met Office monitors. Talk a bit about that work you've been doing for the season.
Right, so at the Met Office, we do work with early warning system. We do impact-based forecasting, where we try to give the public and the disaster management agencies a heads up on what is expected to come in the next few days, and then as the system is nearer to us, we update accordingly. So we have impact-based forecasting. We use colors to kind of alert the public. So we use green, which no action is required. There's not any significant severe weather or hazard threat to the island. Then we go to yellow, which is be aware. And yellow, we use that, for example, if we see the potential for something that could be severe or significant, we would just put our forecast colors to yellow accordingly. So if it's a rainfall event that we are seeing coming in maybe in 2 days time, then we would have our alert level to yellow. So just basically saying to the public, just listen out to this about this event that's coming up. It could be significant, it might not be, but just have your ears to the ground. As mentioned, having the CAP, and we also have our app, BMS Insight, and that would encompass the lead up to events, whereas CAP, you would get the information for weather statements, or you would get information for bulletins when we issue warnings or watches. Additionally, then we go into orange, which is where we are saying be prepared, and that's normally linked with our advisories or our watches. So if we issue a flood watch, for example, a flood watch we would issue if the possibility of flooding is there due to excessive rainfall, we will issue a watch. So then we are saying to the public, be prepared. Start putting your preparations in place. That would be similar if we issue a storm watch. We are saying start to get your plans in place. And then we go to red, which is take action. Red is our warnings. So red means that a significant weather event, whether it is haze, whether it is rainfall, whether it is wind, which would be storms or hurricanes, is imminent. That event is imminent of occurring, and therefore you should take action. You should ensure that everything you have in place already, any of those plans that you might have been putting in place, that those are coming to an end, and you have everything in place for whatever hazard it is, whether it's a short term, something that is quick, because sometimes we have the flash flood warnings or watches, which are thunderstorms. That's something where it is kind of it's an event that is happening very quickly, or it might be something that's a little further out. For example, a tropical storm where we can see that developing over a time period, and we would issue a watch up to 36 hours in advance of the event occurring. So that is how we use the early warning system at the Met Office and our predictions to try to get you to think ahead, not just wait till the last minute. So I know that you, as the public of Barbados, you guys don't want to just hear, oh, there's a warning or there's a watch. You want to know ahead of time so you could plan accordingly, and we understand that, and we try to put that in place so people can always be prepared for any hazard that may occur.
Yes, one thing when you're dealing with a hurricane or a system of that nature, when you're dealing with a tsunami, it's a whole other ball game. Does the Met Office have any technology to track such systems, such situations, I would say, as they occur? A volcano erupts, generates a tsunami. How do you monitor that?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, we are the alerting body for tsunamis. So we are the focal point for tsunamis in Barbados. If a tsunami is has occurred and is expected to affect Barbados, we would issue a tsunami advisory or a warning. We currently have, which we recently designed last year, we call it a tsunami bot, which is basically an automated system. So when we get the information from the tsunami warning center, then it automatically sends out. So then it takes away that human interaction of an individual having to read the message and then send out information. Yes, we do use the radios to connect with our partners, but that tsunami message goes out immediately to the public. So that's what we've been doing to try to kind of cut off the time period for issuing a warning or advisory for tsunamis.
Yeah, and I know we were going to talk a bit more about that warning system too, because there are sound warnings, which I know there are drills for sound warnings in other jurisdictions, something that myself and Director Hinds have spoken about before, but we want to get to hear about the development of that again, see if we can get an update on that. But CDEMA now, CDEMA has been working with the region for quite some time. I remember going in to some islands in the region, St. Vincent, I can remember for sure, in the aftermath of what was a trough system, which passed that country, but it did some remarkable damage. It was unbelievable to actually see what just a simple trough system could do to a country. Talk about, I know we were looking at risk management and analyzing before, but just talk a bit about the work that CDEMA has been doing in this regard as well, in trying to help member states build their capacity to respond to weather events.
Thanks for the question, Shane. Well, I want to first start by saying that CDEMA has worked very hard to ensure that we can guide our states with the model guidance. So, and also in terms of the resource mobilization, we, in the case of Barbados, we would have mobilized the resources for them to develop their multi-hazard early warning systems policy with funding from the European Development Fund. And also, we also had funding from the World Bank that allowed us to undertake an assessment to understand where Barbados was. What's the starting line for Barbados? There are established standards related to the different aspects of the early warning system. So when we assess Barbados, we identify where the gaps are, and from that to have an evidence-based policy. What we've then also done is to provide guidance as to how the policy should be developed. What are the steps for developing that study for the policy? What areas should the policy cover? And then to adapt the policy to ensure that it's addressing the gaps. So for example, we do know that in the case of Barbados, there are issues with legislation. Our Met Services, it's very good what the Met Services are doing with the resources that they have. But in terms of giving them the authority legislatively, that is a necessity. And so one of the key strategic interventions in Barbados' policy speaks to assessing the legislation that is there, and then also ensuring that we develop legislation for the different actors to be able to take the necessary actions and to have the resources that they need. So thus far, CDEMA's role has been resource mobilization, providing guidance. What we've also done is to establish a regional early warning systems consortium. We recognize that when we're talking about multiple hazards, there are multiple actors, and each of them brings something to the table, but we also need to coordinate. We also need to have standards across the region in terms of the equipment that is used, in terms of the feedback loops that we want to have to make sure that people are getting those warnings. And so CDEMA has convened a regional early warning systems mechanism, also including broadcasting, the broadcast union, universities to ensure we have the science there and so forth. Because the reality, Shane, is that multi-hazard early warning systems is not simply about having a system that can give you a warning about different hazards, floods and earthquakes and so forth, but you want to be able to also identify the cascading aspects of that hazard. You can have hazards happening simultaneously. You can have them happening in a way where it's accumulation. You know, we would have come out of a dry season and you have a heavy rainfall. What is the impact of that? So CDEMA's role has been to bring these particular priorities to the table and to ensure that we have the policies in the countries, and then also to ensure that we are coordinating with our regional entities. So you spoke about the TROP system in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and the response action that would go with that. Because the reality, Shane, is that an effective early warning system is not only one that ensures that the information gets out, but also we want to ensure that people have the capability and capacity to respond. So CDEMA has also been working to ensure that the response capabilities in our states are at a particular standard. So we do organize those regional exercises and training to ensure that the states are at a required level. And I just want to say one other piece. Recently, we've been working to ensure that these standard operating procedures are in place between the communication that will happen between the Disaster Management Office and the National Meteorological and Hydrological Services. We don't have these standard operating procedures in place. And so these are priorities, and CDEMA has been working to ensure that we have these available to our participating states.
Yeah, you know, I have to ask you about the level of satisfaction in terms of, you mentioned the legislation and how that needs to be revamped so that the services and those actors can take action when necessary. So I'll come back to you on that. We do have a caller on the line. Welcome to the People's Business. Good night, caller. What's your question or comment?
Good night, say to you and the party.
Good night.
To you and the guests. One of the problems that is really, you know, sometimes the Met system announce that there's a system coming, and then people go and buy up inside the supermarket and everything, then the next morning and get up and find the sun out. I know that they are not God, you know, but sometimes that happens a lot. You might hear this speak to tell that a tropical depression was coming, and then we got up another morning and the sun was out bright.
Well, thank you for your comment. Semelka, I'll come to you on that. I know people give the Met Office, well, they don't cut you any slack, especially when that happens.
Yeah,
but it's all about being prepared, being cautious. And I think that's the message of this program, and that's what you're building that multi-hazard early warning system to do, so that people take those precautions and take action so that they're ready for whatever is coming. Semelka, you still get a lot of that at the Met Office about your predictions?
Yes, we do get some. We do get on the other end of things. As I mentioned, we update meteorology. What we are doing are we are forecasting, we're making a prediction. So sometimes what we expect may change, but we want to ensure that Barbadians and our partners in DEM know what we see coming in the future and what are the possibilities. So we, for example, as the gentleman was speaking about last week, we saw a tropical wave, a relatively strong tropical wave, and that tropical wave has went on to develop in the Caribbean and is currently affecting Central America. We saw impacts for Barbados as it relates to wind, and we saw it as it relates to rainfall. We track these systems as they come across the Atlantic and see what the impacts would be for Barbados. So for the example given last week, we would have seen the potential for high rainfall, and we also saw the potential for gusty winds. So we first started, it was outside of the forecast period. We started by just giving a general information statement to the public. There is a tropical wave out there. It is expected to affect Barbados, and we could get these impacts, gusty winds and significant rainfall. each day we would have updated the public with the changes. Sometimes we saw that the wave was not acting quite how we had expected it to act at the time, and we would have updated our statement to suit. So at this time, we're asking the public to just be aware, listen out to the updates, and we continue to update. So on the day of, we saw that winds had picked up and we received some gusty winds from the system. We didn't receive the excessive rainfall. And as the days progressed leading up to that, we would have informed the public of what to expect so that you can arrange the suit. Yes, gusty winds might not affect one person, but it may have a significant effect to, say, a crane operator or persons in construction or persons working at high elevations. And that is why we need to let the public know of the hazards that can occur, and we have to update them. And sometimes we do issue forecasts at set times, but if we see conditions changing and they are changing to become more favorable, whereas we see things that nicer weather conditions happening, we're going to say that yes, we expected excessive rainfall, but that is no longer happening, and we let the public know, so then you can rearrange the suit. We're not going to leave you expecting excessive rainfall and it no longer occurs. But the main point is to be aware, download the relevant apps, listen to your radio stations. We work closely with the media. Listen to the DEM for the responses that you should do. So if you continue, and we continue to work on improving those sources of communication, because it is all fine for us to say something, but if you don't hear it, then is it really effective? So that's something we've working on, and we will continue to work on continuously.
And we got to be our brother's keeper too. We have conversations with each other. If you hear something, you tell a friend, and a friend tells a friend, and we know how that can cascade. That helps to pass on message. Hopefully it's the right one. We have one more break. We'll take that. Of course, I think we still have a caller on the line. I'll let you comment when we return from this break, Dr. Brewster. So we'll take this quick break and come back and have some final comments here on the People's Business. Time to get in those last words from our disaster management specialist here with us on the People's Business. But before we do that, let's go to the phone line very quickly. I think we have a call waiting there. Good night, caller. Welcome to the People's Business. What's your question or comment?
Hello, good night.
Hello, good night.
Hi. Blessings to everyone there. Yes, how about, the East Coast, which is mostly elevated? How would the reaction of a tsunami on the soil there, the clay soil? Do you think persons should really not take it for granted because they are high, but actually get far away from the coast? And also the gullies, how would a tsunami impact the gullies leading across the island? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. Dr. Brewster, I think that one goes to you.
Is that it also depends upon the severity of the tsunami, obviously. I remember that a tsunami is a series of propagating or following on waves that just keep pushing forward all the time, given the energy of the water as it's moving across the ocean surface very quickly. So if you're looking at it in terms of penetration into a gully, the gully floor is normally very low, so therefore it will act just as it does as a normal water course, and the water will be driven up inside the gully until it reaches a height where it can't go anymore. Okay? That doesn't mean that the land on either side of the gully may be flooded, because as you walk through gullies, you've seen that you can have anywhere between 60 to 100-foot gully walls on either side of you sometimes when you're walking through a gully, and therefore the water will just be penetrating until it gets to a elevation contour height where it can, and then it will start to flow back out again. In terms of the East Coast potential damage, the reality is that those flat, low-lying areas are the areas of greatest potential inundation, and the lands landward of that would still be at an increasing elevation or slope that would prevent too much wave penetration going in. So in some areas where you have very steep slopes, especially those that may be cliffed or highly slanted, the penetration would not be very far. Okay, but on the flat areas, like say in the Walker Savannah area, where you have all the sand dunes, you can have a situation where you may get a lot of overrush and flooding depending upon the height of the wave, right? So it doesn't mean that you're going to get a 100-foot wave coming in. Tsunamis don't always operate like that. It's really and truly the propulsion of the wave coming in and the type of near shore floor surface that you have that allows the wave to draw down and set up, which will then give the height to the wave.
Okay, I want to give everyone about 45 seconds to have some final comments. And as we are on you, Dr. Brewster, I want to start with you to answer this question. Any work being done any additional work, I should say, being done to protect our coastlines?
Shane, we're always doing work to protect our coastline. You know that too. We're always very busy. We have we have 5 new projects planned as part of the potential IDB study that will be starting probably within the next 2 years that are significant projects, and will continue the type of work that we're doing as we do now, because we recognize climate change is real and adaptation along the coast is essential. I just also wanted to point out that Barbadians really and truly need to download the BMS Insight app. It is essential because it covers all the hazards you need to consider, and you also need to get in to do the CAP download, because that tells you priority concerns for information dissemination.
Well, hopefully we can get our producers to put that up, BMS, and of course cap.cap, so that people can know what they can download to have that content, that information at your fingertips, so you will know what to do. Dr. Greenidge, in terms of the action and the gaps that we need to address here in Barbados, what would you say is the most urgent need right now in terms of addressing those gaps? 45 seconds.
I think the priority for Barbados is having that reliable, forward-looking, multi-hazard risk knowledge base. We do have information in different parts, and it's necessary to pull it together and to be able to ensure that it's accessible not only to those persons that are scientific, but the regular man on the street and to the decision makers. So for Barbados, we look forward to seeing how this policy is going forward in implementation. It's 2 of 19 participating states that has developed the policy, and we look forward to seeing great things from Barbados.
Director Hinds, last words from you. What do you want to see Barbadians do better for the rest of the hurricane season, but generally, because we don't only live in a hurricane season of hazards are all year round. Earthquakes don't give us any early warning as we would like.
I think it's important for Barbadians to heed the messages that are disseminated in the public domain. Seek to ensure that you develop your disaster risk management plan at a family level, at a community level, at a business level. And it is also important to participate in the various activities that we have on an ongoing basis, whether that be drills, exercises, at the community, the business level, national level exercises, and also participate. I would encourage everyone to join the district emergency organization.
Indeed.
It is very important that you be your own first responder, and I encourage you to join the organization. It will help in terms of spreading the word and really understanding what community disaster risk management really is, and assisting each other, being our brother's keeper. I cannot underscore that enough. At the end of the day, disaster risk management is a whole of society job. It is not
Yeah.
just the it is not just the Department of Emergency Management or the Coastal Zone Management Unit or CDEMA at the regional level or the Barbados Met Service, but it is really for all of us to participate because at the end of the day, we want to ensure that we have a safer and more resilient Barbados.
Agreed. I really want to thank all of you, Semelka, Director Hinds, Dr. Brewster, Dr. Greenidge, for educating us tonight on the people's business. We have to do this again because the information is important. The information is critical and it can save lives in many instances. Thank you all for sharing with us tonight, and of course, thank you viewers for watching another edition of the People's Business. I'm Shane Seeley. Good night. I don't know if y'all can still hear. Appreciate your time. Dr. Greenidge, nice meeting you. And Semelka, great information. Dr. Brewster, I would really like to see the model, the video of that model that y'all have sometime if you have time for me.
Thanks very much, everyone.
Okay, no problem.